Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Parallax Abstraction and welcome to Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. So today we are taking a look at one of my top favorite arcade games, and it's one of those games that I'm not really sure why I enjoy it so much, but I really do. And it's a game that's very odd because despite existing on a million different home platforms and supposedly doing very well, we've never really seen it expanded upon at all. And, well, it's just really unique and strange, and I'm going to show you why. So, today we're taking a look at RoadBlasters. This came out on the equivalent of anything with a bloody screen at the time, but we are looking at the proper original arcade version here. So what is the object of this game? Well, in a very weird utopian and dystopian future all at the same time, we live in a world where fuel exists in bubble form, it's just freely available on the road, and where the highway is strewn with people having crazy death rallies because that is what sport has evolved into. I don't know, this game has no story whatsoever, but it's a really weird concept. So the idea is that you're running these short sort of rally stages almost, and your goal is to... It's a score attack game at its heart. Hang on.
Shoot opponents for score.
Why, thank you, narrator guy. So the way this game is played is very interesting. There is no express time limit like you would find in something like an Outrun, but there is a limit in that you have apparently what is one of the most fuel-inefficient cars on the face of the Earth. You have to get to the end of... Dang it. So you have no limit to the amount of lives that you have, but you have to get to the end of your rally stage before you run out of fuel. So you start the stage with a certain amount of fuel, you get a fuel bonus at midpoints like you saw there, and in addition to that, you can pick up fuel globes that are strewn upon the road, or sometimes drop from enemies when you kill them. And your objective is to get through 50 stages, if you can believe it, which I have never even... while avoiding turrets, too. And the 50 stages is something that I have never even remotely come close to accomplishing. This game gets brutally hard very quickly.
Shooting accuracy increases multiplier.
And there's the next big mechanic. So one of the things I really like about this game is that its scoring system is actually quite unique because it ties into the whole fuel mechanic and at the same time rewards not being just a big bullet spammer. So, as you can see in the bottom left, there's a multiplier. And the way the multiplier works is it goes up with each successful kill you get. What makes it go down is by shooting your gun and not hitting anything, as you can see. And obviously, you want to keep the multiplier as high as possible for the sake of your score, but in addition to that, you are awarded bonus fuel at the end of every stage, and that is dependent upon both the number of enemies that you killed, and I'm not going to make this one, in addition to what your multiplier is. So, by having a high multiplier, you actually give yourself a bit of an advantage in future levels. In the later levels, you need every drop of fuel that you have, and if you don't have enough of a multiplier built up, you make things unbelievably hard on yourself. So as you can see, I'm getting extra fuel awarded from those green orbs, and occasionally, it hasn't actually been doing it very much, but occasionally red orbs will drop from the enemies, and the red orbs go into your reserve. So as you can see there, we have a main fuel tank and a reserve. So what does that mean? If it's just a second fuel tank, what's even the point of that? Well, so the main tank does not carry over between stages, whereas the reserve does. So if you can do a large number of stages without failure, you will actually build up a greater reserve, which... Ooh, I just squeezed that one in.
Reserve fuel award is based on score.
So there you go. And so that's based on your multiplier. And the reserve fuel can basically be a get-out-of-jail-free card if you happen to do really poorly at a stage. Because as I said, there is no lives in this, so you can die multiple times if you have enough reserve fuel. And... shoot, I missed it. And every few stages as well, you see you get a special weapon drop like that. Sometimes it's a rapid-fire machine gun, sometimes it's missiles, sometimes it's like a nitro boost, things like that. So as you see here, you can die as many times as you want, but you Obviously, can't do that too often because it burns a lot of fuel for you in order to get back up to speed after getting destroyed. So you still can't die very often, but depending on what your reserve is, you can die more often in a level without failing it. And your fuel is the only way you can fail out of a mission. You can get killed as many times as you want as long as you have fuel built up by the end. So now we're in reserve, as you can see, but I had plenty of it, so we're doing okay.
Tap special weapon to increase performance.
That's kind of a weird tip because, yeah, I mean, I guess having a better weapon does increase performance in the sense that you can kill things more efficiently, but it doesn't really make you go any faster. And as you can see in later levels, additional enemies get introduced. So there's those regular orange cars, which are kind of your red shirt cannon fodder. So here's the Uzi cannon, which as you can see is much quicker but has a limit to its use. You have the purple cars, which you can kill, but which are much more difficult to take out and kind of not worth it. You have the bikes, which are easy to kill but hard to hit. And you have those real pain-in-the-arse turrets on the side, which will appear and shoot at you. You can hit them, but it's very hard to. And on occasion, you will also get, as you saw there, mines will appear on the road. You will get warning of those, but you got to really watch it, especially when you're motoring, because they will come up on you super fast. And your ultimate objective here is to get to the end of all 50 rallies. You can, by picking your difficulty level, you can start... There's the bonus fuel. You can pick... Well, that did go into my main tank. You can go into... you can start at a higher level with a bigger point bonus if you want. But really, ideally, you want to start at the first rally because you can do better than the bonus awarded if you're good and you practice at it. So that's what I generally recommend. So this game was pretty cool in its time because while it was available on regular old stand-up arcade cabinets, which did have an analog wheel controller, and that was cool in and of itself, this also was one of the early games to have a sit-down arcade cabinet, which was a whole heck of a lot of fun. Even games like this, which clearly looked anything but like a simulator, it was still a lot more fun to actually sit down and kind of feel like you were driving when you played this thing. I still really like this game. I think it's a lot of fun. It's got, like, the mechanics it has. This is a game that totally understands what it is. It's doesn't have any stupid pretensions of story. It's not trying to go, in a distant dystopian future, people do really nasty car rallies for fuel globes and what limited resources are left on the world. No, it's just, they just took some really weird mechanical ideas that don't make any sense and then combine them together in a way that's really fun and really different. That's what I like about this. The whole fuel mechanic, the whole, multiplier that doesn't... this is another cool thing about the score multipliers that you've probably seen by now, is that when you die, you actually don't lose it. So if you can keep a high multiplier and be careful with how you're shooting, you actually... dying is of no consequence when it comes to that, which is really, really cool. And that was what was neat. It had a scoring system that was very, very different from what you normally saw. It actually rewarded precision rather than just spamming buttons out of a, which is what most games did, because being able to fire guns at a rapid pace without much consequence was kind of the power fantasy angle, right? But this actually really wanted you to be precise. It based your success or failure on a mechanic like fuel, which could carry over between stages. And as you can see here, this gets very hard very quick, though I am better at this game when I'm not commentating over it. But it actually, if you play well, it actually rewards you. In most arcade games, the goal was to suck as much money out of you as fast as possible, and the way they did that was by making every level ridiculously hard on its face. But what was cool in this game is that if you practiced at it and you played well and you got better at it as you went along, you actually could get... died as I crossed the line. You actually could have an advantage in later levels, so it rewarded iterative play. If you were reaching a certain point where you were kind of hitting the wall, you could go back, focus on the early levels, get better at it, and by doing that, you got better reserve fuel award. And as a result, the game gave you a bit of a break when you hit those difficult later periods. And for that reason, it's very, very different. This is not like I love pure arcade racing games like Outrun, for example, and titles of that ilk, but this was really cool because it actually combined racing and combat and did it in a way that was actually fairly deep if you wanted it to be. But at the same time, if you were a very casual player who wasn't even really going for score, you just wanted to drive and blow some stuff up, you could sit here and button mash if you wanted. Like, this base gun will fire basically as fast as you can mash on the button, and you could do that if you want and still succeed. You weren't making it easy on yourself necessarily, but if your goal was to sit down and just play this for a little while and spend $1 or $2 and not get driven on reaching the top of the leaderboard and making it through all 50 rallies, then you could do that too. You could just, there we go. It awarded, or it encouraged and rewarded casual play or hardcore play, and it excelled at doing both. And, the cruise missile, which is really just miniature nukes, which I always thought was... The way this works is very odd. You're not actually hitting anything. You're just shooting it into the distance, which basically nukes everything and makes it kind of phase out of existence, but it doesn't actually blow up. I don't get it either. Another thing as well that you could learn if you really wanted to put in the time is that... my weapon... is that those green globes actually had the same placement in every level. They are not randomly generated, so if you got to know the levels well enough, you could know where the fuel was going to come and get it before, and get in place before it came up on you. The red globes were somewhat random, but the green ones were not. I actually kind of really like the very FM synthy soundtrack to this game too, which is very odd in that you only got those little riffs in between stages. The core levels themselves were actually silent for the most part, which I always thought was a bit of an odd choice, but probably due to technical limitations. This was based on some pretty old hardware. And, well, you've seen the majority of what I think makes this game really, really cool. This came out on about 1 million different systems. It was out on... It was in the arcades, which honestly is the best version. I don't think any of the home conversions I played can hold a candle to this version. Some of them are really, really bad, and some of them are better than others. But I don't think any of them can hold up to this. But this came out in the arcades on the Mega Drive / Genesis, which is probably one of the best home conversions. Came out on the Atari Lynx, the Amstrad, the ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64, the Amiga. That version's okay too. The Atari ST and the NES, which I actually played a lot of the NES version, which is actually terrible. It's a horrible conversion of this game. But when I couldn't get access to the local bowling alley that had the RoadBlasters machine back in the day, that was sort of the best I could get at the time, because I had an Atari. Despite this being developed by Atari Games, I had an Atari home computer which did actually not get a version of this game, which is very strange. But Atari also didn't handle the majority of the home conversions either. So, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I'm really surprised that there aren't more in this series. There has never been a RoadBlasters 2, and I've never seen anybody do this since. And it would be very hard to do a modern interpretation of this game because it's so mechanically straightforward on its face. It would require a fair amount of expansion, I guess, of its ideas and concepts in order to be something appealing to the demands of a modern audience. I mean, you could get I guess you could make a simplified mobile version, but I can't even imagine playing something like this with touchscreens without it being dumbed down and having its soul sucked out. But I'd love to see someone take a crack at this. I have no idea who owns this now. Atari Games, which was the Atari arcade division, eventually got bought by Midway, who has long since imploded. And I don't actually know who owns this IP now. Warner Brothers bought a lot of the Midway stuff, so maybe it's them. Really hard to say. I screwed that up. That's the nitro injector, which is just a speed booster, which is very handy. But Yeah, if you want to play this right now, unfortunately, pretty much the only way to get it in on a modern system is in the original Midway Arcade Treasures pack. Midway, when they were still Midway, it's right there, released 3 sets of arcade compilations that were developed by Backbone Entertainment for the PS2, the original Xbox, and the GameCube. And this was on Midway Arcade Treasures Volume 1. This actual version, it was a conversion of the arcade game, so it's the proper one. And they actually tuned it for modern controllers, because this game was actually very tricky because it used an analog steering wheel, so a modern gamepad normally wouldn't work without a little bit of tweaking done to it, which they took care of. And it plays pretty well that way. So that's probably the best way to play this version. I mean, as I said, there are home conversions available, but none of them are any good in comparison to this. This is the best thing. And this is one of those things that, despite being popular and despite being really cool and different, it just kind of died, and it's never been continued. And I would love to see that done at some point, because I still really have a lot of fun with this game, despite the fact that, as you can see, it gets very punishing very quickly. Nice reserve boost there. But that's basically the gist of it. I think this game's still a lot of fun, and it did stuff with the racing genre that few other games did. It was simple yet deep if you wanted it to be, and used some mechanics that I'm kind of surprised more people didn't copy, to be honest, because it had stuff like this was really unique and different, and we rarely saw it in arcade games. But this was in an era where arcades were largely being dominated by Japanese titles. Some of the American companies did come up with some pretty cool ideas, and this was definitely among them. But yeah, the game is RoadBlasters, developed and published by Atari Games in 1987, the original version, the original arcade version that we were playing here. It is available on a variety of other platforms, as I said, not as good. And if you want to play this, you basically got to get your hands on a copy of Midway Arcade Treasures. Otherwise, this is kind of in the dustbin of history, which is a real shame. Hopefully we'll see it elsewhere at some point soon. But I really like it. If you like arcade racing games and you want something that's definitely off the beaten path while still being a real blast, I highly, highly recommend this. This is still one of my favorite arcade games. My name has been Parallax Abstraction. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.